Alright, so we're right here in the Catholic Museum in the city of Bagamoyo in Tanzania. And here's on the grounds here is actually an old Catholic church. Right next to us is the museum. So this gentleman right here is Tipu Tip. Tipu Tip was one of the most infamous slave traders of all times. He used to drive slaves all the way from the East and Central African interior right here to Bagamoyo. And the word Bagamoyo actually means lay down your heart. Because if you made that trip all the way on a caravan across the interior of Africa, from maybe the Congo, maybe Uganda, what's now Kenya, you made it all the way here, then this was the last time that you would ever touch the continent of Africa. And so they tell you, brother, lay down your heart, because you'll never see home again. Right here it tells you the numbers, and the East African slave trade, they're saying 347,000 to Arabia, Persia, and India. South Africa and America, 276,000. Reunion and Mauritius, 95,000. And Pemba, the coast in Zanzibar, almost 769,000. This is the direction here of the slave trade from out of East Africa. And so there's a market here, but also in Zanzibar. The main market was in Zanzibar. And actually the slave market in Zanzibar is the oldest open-air slave market in the world. And it closed in the early 1900s. But the ultimate insult for the slave trade going to the Arabia and Persia is that the men were castrated to make sure that the population there was never blackened by the slaves. So when you come here to this museum, I mean, it's amazing. When you actually go to Zanzibar, little O, when we went to the museum in Zanzibar, an actual slave dungeon. And when you sit in that slave dungeon, I mean, it does something to you. Even over here, these are actual chains that were worn. And these right here, this is like a bit of fruit. It's like a cocoa fruit. And they would eat this to stay awake, you know, while they would be driving the slaves, these once free people, right here to Bagamoyo. And here in Bagamoyo was the last time that they were ever be on the continent of Africa. So if you ever come to Tanzania, especially if you're in the Dar es Salaam area, you have to come here to Bagamoyo so you can see this. You can learn about Tipu Tip, learn about the East African slave trade.
What is this?
Yeah, so this is the underground chambers. So the place where the slaves were kept. For this small room, for 50 men. 50 men in here, so another room there for 75 women and children. So they were stayed here for 2 days without water and food. So after here, to the middle of the church, before the church, it was a whipping post. I mean, it was a place where the slaves were whipped, just to test if strong or not strong. If the slave cry, the prices go down because not strong. So today we have electricity light, but before very few light to the original windows. Also no toilet here, just down here it was toilet. So many slaves were dead by suffocation and starvation. So slaves came from East Africa to Zanzibar, after here to the Middle East, because the first Sultan of Zanzibar, Sultan Said bin Sultan, in 1832, he made Zanzibar the center of the slave trade. So from East African to Zanzibar, after here to the Middle East, like Arabic countries and Indian countries, not to American. All slave to American from West African, like Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon. So this part is the East African slave trade from Kenya, Uganda, and the Congo. Walked a long way from local villages until Bagamoyo with the chains around their necks. You see? After here, Zanzibar just to the farm market and then to the Middle East. So slave market was closed in 1873. And then 1874, Bishop Erudistia built the church.
And this is for the women?
For the women, 75 there. Also they stayed there under
So slaves from here, they went to the Arab countries?
Yeah, Middle East, yeah.
Middle East.
Yeah.
India?
India as well.
As well.
Yeah.
Kuwait, with a population of scarcely 300,000, takes in close to $3 million a day in oil royalties. Not that these millions are allowed to trickle down, but to raise the standard of living of the people, of the Fellahin or the Bedouins. Instead, oil has brought in its wake a new biblical curse. It has raised the price of human flesh. Storage tanks and pipelines add a new and modern decorative touch to the vast emptiness of the desert. But they provide no sustenance for the people who live nearby, in hunger and misery and desperation. Water is precious, and the camel is precious. And to give the camel a rest now and then, water is drawn by slaves. These girls, 10 to 12 years old, are blindfolded to keep from getting dizzy as they take turns with a camel. The most modern equipment available is used to extract oil from thousands of feet below the surface of the earth. But water must be drawn by the effort of human slaves. For luckier children, there are model schools inside the palaces. The pupils pray before lessons begin. We are permitted to film the pupils as they come out of the royal school. More than 100, we are told, are children of the sovereign himself. Following them are the children of the princes and high dignitaries. They're clean, well-disciplined, happy children. But note that some of them do not carry books. These are children of the oil rich. Their books are carried by their personal slaves. Slaves received as gifts from their parents on their birthdays. Slaves who will grow up alongside their masters and serve as their personal gods. Most of these are children of palace slaves, and according to the law, they too are slaves. The oil millions turn into automobiles from Detroit, parking lots, and traffic cops who direct traffic straight toward the desert. We travel along the edge of the Sahara to reach the Peuls, a pastoral people once numerous and powerful, now reduced to a few thousand by mass raids of slave merchants early in this century. They no longer have any cattle of their own. The great herds they lead to pasture are owned by
anybody would treat a human being like that. I don't know why many Saudi Arabians are treating Africans like this and getting away with it. As you know, this is not peculiar to Kenyans. Ethiopians are treated the same way. I've talked about this in the past. In fact, there are several pictures of Ethiopians killed in Saudi Arabia, men and women. But how come this is still happening after they deported thousands of immigrants from Saudi Arabia? How come they are still treating people like this? I found out that Saudi Arabia sponsorship system known as kafala ties employment visas to employers, indirectly turning voluntary servitude to slavery. They do this to Asians as well. They would arrange a resident permit by recruiting agencies that match the worker to the household, and then they would charge both parties a recruitment fee. So now the workers will become indebted to the agencies. A typical workday for domestic workers in Saudi Arabia is between 15 to 18 hours in a day. Imagine somebody working straight for 18 hours in a day out of 24 hours, and they pay them about $5 to $7 per day. And guess what? Some of these employers would refuse to pay the employees for a long time. In fact, sometimes for years, they may not pay their employees. They would say, we're giving you food, we're giving you a place to sleep, even if it's outside. They would say, what do you need the money for? So many employers have actually killed their employees if they keep asking for their money. There are no off days, no rest hours, there is no vacation, no nothing. As you know, slavery was officially abolished in Saudi Arabia in 1960. At that time though, there were about 300,000 slaves still in Saudi Arabia. Even though it was abolished on paper, hey, the practice continued unofficially. First of all, when will our people in Africa learn that the grass is not necessarily greener on the other side and that not all the glitter is gold? I mean, we've been hearing stories like this for a long time, long time, yet there are people who are still bent on taking their chances. As bad as it was for Joyce, she's actually very lucky. Very lucky, because several women were not able to escape for years. I've read stories of women who escaped after 2 years, after 4 years, and some were actually killed by their owners. Some men are treated the same way. In fact, 2 years ago, a Saudi man was advertising a male slave on Facebook, and he stated that they've castrated the man, rendering him impotent. This is the English version of what he said. So this is the thing. If you're not going to Saudi for tourism or for pilgrimage or to take up a professional job, please be careful. Please and please be careful. Again, I wish that African leaders would just develop our countries so that our people would not continue to suffer in the hands of such people in the name of searching for better life. And lastly, if you know someone or someone who knows someone who's desperate to get out of his or her country without knowing anything about where they're going, and please warn them to be familiar with where they're going. At least be able to speak the language of where you're going. Don't go anywhere because you got a contract from anyone. Really, Saudi Arabia, for how long would you treat Africans like this? And you know, I can't help but remember that hashtag that was started by Ethiopians when so many of them were being deported from Saudi Arabia. They had this hashtag called "Someone Tell Saudi Arabia." Someone tell Saudi Arabia that you cannot continue to treat human beings like this. Someone tell Saudi Arabia that just because the color of our skin is different from yours doesn't mean you're better in any way. Someone tell Saudi Arabia that the world is watching. We know what is going on. Someone tell Saudi Arabia that enough is enough. Someone tell Saudi Arabia that this will not go on for long. Someday, Africa will take its rightful place among the rising continents. Someone tell Saudi Arabia. Guess what? I'm just keeping it real.